Let me introduce myself. I am Marcus, the older brother of a duo that lived through a surreal and macabre experience. I've always been the nostalgic one, the one who cherishes every memory. I work as a game designer, a passion I've had since childhood. Old video games have always fascinated me, connecting me to special moments. My brother Peter, on the other hand, is the skeptic of the family. Practical and rational, he has always been the protector, the most sensible one. As an engineer, Peter analyzes everything precisely, ensuring nothing gets out of control. He always had reservations about my habit of keeping everything that reminded us of our childhood, but on that rainy day, something different happened. We were at our parents' house, organizing the old garage full of ancient junk. You know how it is, that place full of dusty objects, each carrying a story. Among cardboard boxes and forgotten toys, we found our old collections of X-Men comics and He-Man action figures, remnants of a time when our biggest worry was what the next episode of Knights of the Zodiac would be. "Look at this, Marcus," Peter called, holding an old toy box. "Remember these trading cards? We used to spend hours swapping them in the schoolyard." I smiled, pulling a faded sticker album from the box. "Yes, and we were always missing that rare one we could never find." As we rummaged through the boxes, we found our old Nintendo and Sega Genesis game cartridges. "Look, Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario Bros. How many afternoons did we spend playing these?" Peter said, shaking his head with a nostalgic smile. But then, something caught our attention in a peculiar way. Amid piles of comic books and old toys, there was a video game console I didn't remember seeing before. It had a different design, with the name Hades Virtual engraved on the front in Gothic letters. "Peter, do you remember this console?" I asked, holding the dusty device. Peter frowned. "Never seen it before. Must have been a gift we never used." The Hades Virtual was different from any console I had ever seen. Its design was both ancient and unsettling, with a matte black finish and blood-red details. The Gothic letters engraved on the front, Hades Virtual, gave the device an eerie feel. Unlike modern consoles, full of lights and colorful screens, the Hades Virtual seemed like an artifact from another era. What intrigued us the most was the absence of a compartment for cartridges or CDs. Where were the games? There were no visible slots. "Where do we put the cartridge?" Peter asked, turning the console in his hands. When we finally turned on the console, it emitted a strange sound, a mix of static and a low tone that reverberated through the garage. The TV screen flickered before displaying the main menu, where the title, Clamor of Lost Souls, Celestial Apex, appeared in somber letters. The background music was a soft and hypnotic melody that sent chills down our spines. "Look at this, Peter," I pointed to the screen. "I think the games are all here." The main screen was rustic, reminiscent of the pixelated graphics of old Atari games. 8-bit skulls and demons adorned the menu, creating a sense of discomfort. There weren't many options, just start game, and the choice to play with 1 or 2 players. Each click on the control seemed to echo through the room, as if we were unlocking an ancient secret. Finally, we selected the start game option. The screen went dark for a moment, and along with it, the entire environment around us. The garage began to tremble and crumble. We felt the ground open beneath our feet. Suddenly, there was a flash, and everything went white. And when we opened our eyes, the landscape around us was infernal, full of flames and dancing shadows. We felt a chill down our spines as we realized we were no longer in our reality. The game had transported us to another dimension, a place where terror was palpable. Before us stretched the Valley of Laments. The landscape was sinister. The sky was covered with black clouds, cut by sporadic lightning. The air was heavy, laden with the smell of sulfur and the constant sound of distant wails. The ground was a mix of hard rock and fetid mud, dotted with bones and ruins of ancient structures. Deformed creatures lurked in the shadows, their eyes glowing with malice. "Marcus, where are we?" Peter asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, trying to stay calm, "but we need to find a way out of here." It didn't take long for us to encounter our first challenges. Smaller creatures, resembling demons, emerged from the shadows. They had twisted bodies and sharp claws, advancing on us with clearly hostile intentions. Our first reaction was pure panic, but we quickly realized we had to fight to survive. We picked up pieces of wood and metal from the ruins around us, improvising weapons. The initial battles were brutal and clumsy. However, we soon noticed something strange. We had certain combat skills that we didn't possess in real life. We moved with more agility and precision, delivering blows that seemed instinctive, as if they were part of the game character's abilities. We felt fighting memories that weren't ours, giving us extra strength. Gradually, we began to develop survival strategies. We realized that working together was essential. Peter, with his protective instinct, took care of defending me while I attacked the creatures. It was a rudimentary system, but it worked. As we advanced through the valley, we began to strengthen physically and emotionally. The wounds and fatigue were constant, but they were also a reminder that we were alive and fighting. It was then that we met Noah. In the middle of a particularly fierce battle, a boy appeared among the ruins. He was about 10 years old, with disheveled blonde hair and eyes that seemed to shine with wisdom beyond his age. He watched the fight with an unsettling calm. "You're doing well," he said, after helping us defeat an especially fierce creature. "But you need to improve your tactics if you want to survive here." "Who are you?" I asked, still panting. "My name is Noah," he replied with an enigmatic smile. "I'm here to help." Noah was an enigma. He seemed to know a lot about the world we were trapped in, guiding us through safe paths and teaching us how to face the creatures more efficiently. He was calm and confident, a strangely comforting presence amid the chaos. His guidance was crucial. He showed us how to identify the creatures' weak points, how to use the terrain to our advantage, and where to find hidden resources. With his help, our battles began to feel less desperate and more controlled. Noah told us about the place we were in. This place was Purgatory, and we were trapped. "What you are going through is a test, and you need to be very strong to make it to the end." We followed Noah for what seemed like an eternity until we arrived at a lake. The sight was chilling. Covered by a thick fog, we could barely see the other shore. The waters were treacherous, black as pitch, reflecting a ghostly light. Monstrous aquatic creatures swam just below the surface, their indistinct forms creating ripples in the water. "This is the Lake of Anguish," Noah said, his calm voice contrasting with the terrifying scene. "Crossing won't be easy, but it's the only way to move forward." On the shore of the lake, we found an old wooden boat. Its planks creaked and seemed ready to fall apart, but it was our only option. Carefully, we climbed into the boat and started rowing. With each movement, the fog closed in around us, making it difficult to see more than a few meters ahead. When we finally reached the other shore, a monster emerged. From the depths of the lake, a colossal creature rose, with enormous tentacles and glowing eyes of spectral blue. Its body was covered in black scales, and each movement created waves that nearly knocked us over. "Attention, it's the first boss," Noah warned, his expression serious. The battle was intense. The monster attacked with its tentacles, whipping the air and water with force. We had to use all our newly acquired skills to dodge and counterattack. Peter used a piece of metal as a shield, blocking the attacks, while I, armed with an improvised spear, tried to pierce the creature. However, the creature was cunning and powerful. Each tentacle seemed to have a life of its own, attacking from different directions. We combined our efforts, with Peter deflecting the heaviest blows while I tried to find an opening. The tension between us was palpable, as we knew any mistake could be fatal. Noah, observing the battle, shouted, "The eyes! Aim for the eyes!" Following his guidance, we targeted the monster's glowing eyes. Every time we landed a hit, the creature roared in pain and recoiled, but this also enraged it, making its attacks even more ferocious. The water around us churned violently, creating a chaotic scene. Finally, with a precise strike to the monster's central eye, I managed to wound it mortally. The creature let out a horrendous scream before sinking back into the depths, leaving the lake water stained a dark red. "Good job," Noah said, his eyes reflecting a mix of relief and respect. "You are improving." After the battle, as we caught our breath, I looked at Noah and asked, "What happens if we die here?" He sighed, his expression grave. "I can't say for sure. Here, death is different. It's not an end, but a kind of condemnation. They say if someone dies, their body regenerates, but the pain persists. They will remain eternally alive, feeling every wound, every suffering, without relief." Peter frowned, visibly shaken. "So if we die, we'll be condemned to an existence of infinite pain?" Noah nodded slowly. "Exactly. That's why you need to be extremely careful. Here, more than anywhere else, survival is a constant test. The only way to escape this torment is to cross the entire purgatory and find the exit." I exchanged a worried look with Peter. "That's horrible," I murmured. After Noah's revelation, we continued our journey until we reached a desert. The landscape was desolate, a vast sea of sand stretching as far as the eye could see. The scorching sun hung in the sky, relentless, while mirages danced on the horizon, creating illusions of water and shade. Each step in the soft sand was an effort, draining our energy and testing our endurance. "Welcome to the desert of lost souls," Noah said in a somber tone. "This place is full of traps and illusions. We need to stay alert." The heat was overwhelming, making the landscape ripple and distort. The mirages looked deceptively real. In one of them, I saw a refreshing lagoon, but Noah grabbed my arm. "It's not real," he warned. "Everything here wants to deceive us." Walking through the desert was a constant struggle against exhaustion and hallucinations. The intense heat and repetitive landscape began to mess with our heads. As we advanced, we started to face our own fears and insecurities. I saw shadows moving in the distance, memories of past mistakes and failures I thought I had overcome. Peter also seemed disturbed, constantly looking over his shoulder, as if expecting something to attack him at any moment. "Marcus, do you see that?" Peter asked, pointing to a figure in the distance. It looks like our father." I looked in the direction he indicated, but saw nothing. "Peter, they're just illusions. We need to stay focused." The hallucinations continued to torment us. It felt like the desert was playing with our minds, bringing out our deepest fears. Several times, we nearly fell into hidden traps, pits in the sand that quickly closed behind us. Noah, always vigilant, guided us along the safest path, but even he seemed shaken. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble. The sand before us rose, forming a gigantic figure made of shimmering grains. An imposing and threatening sand demon appeared before us. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its voice resonated like the wind blowing through a canyon. "You dare cross my domain?" the demon roared. "You will only pass if you solve my riddle. Otherwise, you will be buried alive in the sand forever." Peter and I exchanged a tense look. We knew this could be our last chance. "What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening?" the demon asked, its voice reverberating through the desert. I was paralyzed, trying to remember where I had heard this riddle before. Peter, however, seemed more focused. "It's man," Peter replied, his voice firm. "When he's a baby, he crawls on all 4s. When he's an adult, he walks on 2 legs, and when he's old, he uses a cane as a 3rd leg." The demon watched us in silence for a moment, before letting out a thunderous laugh. "Very well, humans, you are smarter than you appear." The figure of the demon dissolved into a whirlwind of sand, and the path ahead of us was clear. Crossing the desert was not easy. The desolate landscape, with its mirages and illusions, tried to deceive us until the last moment, but we kept our focus. Finally, after hours of exhausting walking, we reached the end of the desert, and strangely, the landscape began to change. In the distance, we could see trees. After the arduous journey through the desert, we finally arrived at the Forest of Laments. The transformation of the environment was abrupt and disturbing. The forest was ominous, with tall, dense trees that blocked most of the light. The darkness was almost tangible, creating a claustrophobic and frightening atmosphere. Every step we took echoed ominously, as if the forest itself were alive and watching us. The air was heavy with humidity, and the scent of damp earth and decay permeated the air. "We need to be cautious here," whispered Noah. "The creatures that inhabit this forest hunt in the darkness. Our only means of survival is to move stealthily and hide when necessary." Shadowy creatures with glowing eyes lurked among the trees. They had skeletal forms, with long arms and sharp claws that scratched the ground as they moved. Their eyes reflected a sinister light, and their movements were almost imperceptible, like shadows dancing in the dark. Their hissing breaths echoed around us, increasing the sense of dread. We chose to move silently, using the trees and caves along the way to hide. The fear was palpable, and every sound in the forest made our hearts race. The terrain was treacherous, full of twisted roots and dry leaves that crunched under our feet. The feeling of being watched was constant, and the darkness seemed to close in around us, suffocating. As we advanced, the fear and distrust between Peter and me began to grow. The darkness seemed to intensify our worst traumas and insecurities. We began to question our decisions, doubt each other. Painful memories of our past emerged, like wounds that never healed. We argued over small mistakes, the stress and fear amplifying each failure. It was then that another demon appeared. This was not a brute force creature, but a vengeful spirit that manipulated our memories. It appeared as a nebulous figure wearing entirely black clothing. "Today you will be condemned to live here eternally," said the spirit, its voice echoing in our minds. "I am your worst fears, the secrets you hide from each other." Suddenly, I was flooded with visions of the past. I saw our parents arguing, moments when I had failed as a brother and as a person. Peter was also trapped in his own hallucinations, recalling mistakes he had made and the times he felt he had let me down. The spirit's manipulation was so strong that we began to fight each other. "You never take anything seriously, Marcus," Peter shouted, his voice full of frustration and anger. "Always acting on impulse and putting us in danger." "You're Mr. Perfection, aren't you?" I retorted, my own anger boiling. "Always judging me, never understanding that I just wanted to help." The fight escalated quickly. The spirit fed off our discord, growing stronger with each exchanged insult. Our hands closed into fists, and before we knew it, we started to punch each other. The accumulated anger and resentment over the years came to the surface. "You were always the favorite of our parents," I accused as we traded blows. "They always compared me to you, saying how much better you were." "And you could never stay in your lane," Peter retorted, pushing me, "always invading my space, wanting to do everything I did." The physical fight reflected years of competition for attention, constant comparisons, and a desire for independence. We were on the ground, trading punches and kicks, while the spirit watched, feeding off our pain and conflict. It was then that Noah intervened. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. He stepped between us, pushing us apart with unexpected strength. "This is exactly what the spirit wants. You need to see beyond the illusions." His intervention brought us back to reality. We remembered that we were on the same side, fighting the same enemy, and that fighting each other in that moment made no sense. Gradually, I regained my sanity, just as Peter did, and we managed to repel the memories manipulated by the spirit. Finally, we broke the spirit's control over our minds. With one last combined effort, we destroyed the nebulous figure, banishing it back to the shadows from which it came. Noah looked at us with a mix of pride and sadness. "You did well, but this is where I must stop. From here you must go on alone. The next terrain will be the hardest, and only you can pass." Noah's words hit us hard. He had been our guide, our friend, and now we would have to continue without him. "Thank you, Noah," Peter said, his voice choked with emotion. "We'll make it through this," I added firmly, though I wasn't so sure myself. After leaving Noah behind, We headed towards the final challenge, the Mountain of Torment. The sight of the mountain was intimidating. Its peak seemed to touch the sky, shrouded in dark clouds that swirled like an eternal storm. The steep ascent was filled with obstacles, and the sense of fear was palpable. "Let's go, Peter," I said, trying to infuse us both with courage. "We're almost there." The terrain was treacherous. Loose rocks slid under our feet, making us struggle for balance. The air was thin, making it difficult to breathe, and the fatigue began to accumulate in our bodies. With every step, the mountain seemed to resist, testing our determination. As we climbed, we faced a series of physical and emotional challenges. Huge rocks blocked our path, forcing us to climb carefully. At certain points, the path was so narrow that one misstep would mean a fatal fall. The cold wind cut into our skin, and the constant feeling of being watched increased our anxiety. Fear and exhaustion began to affect our minds. Memories of our childhood emerged, moments when we supported each other and others when we hurt each other. These memories gave us strength, and at the same time, tested our relationship. The challenge was not only physical, but also emotional. Finally, we reached a plateau on the mountain where the air seemed electrified with a heavy energy. In the center, an imposing figure awaited us. A demon who identified himself as Abaddon, a terrifying creature with black wings and red eyes. Just looking at that creature sent a chill down my spine, and fear struck me with intense force. "You have come far," said the demon, his voice rumbling like thunder. "But this is where it ends." That horrendous monster approached and began attacking us with its sharp claws and spewing black fire from its mouth. Peter and I fought with everything we had learned so far. The fight was intense and brutal. Each blow we landed seemed to be absorbed by the creature, and each of its attacks felt like being hit by a rhino. The terrain added an extra layer of tension and difficulty, with loose rocks and nearby cliffs where everything was happening. In a critical moment, Abaddon managed to wound Peter gravely. He fell to his knees, and I felt his pain as if it were my own. Blood spilled from his mouth, and he was visibly shaken. The demon approached and lifted him, but with a pointed piece of metal, Peter struck him in the eye. Abaddon recoiled from the blow, dropping him. At that moment, Peter looked at me with an expression that said, "I love you, my brother." With one final cry of defiance, he launched himself at the demon, grabbing him with all his strength. With a final movement, Peter threw himself into the pit, along with the demon, disappearing into the darkness below. Tears streamed down my face as I looked into the pit. It shook me deeply, as Noah had already warned us what happens to those who die here. After Peter's sacrifice, I continued climbing the mountain until I reached the celestial apex. The scenery changed drastically. The darkness and torment of the mountain gave way to an ethereal and stunning environment. Bright lights danced in the air, and a sense of peace flooded the place. In the distance, I saw a large golden gate radiating a soft, welcoming light. With hesitant steps, I approached the gate. As I pushed it open, a feeling of calm and serenity washed over me. On the other side, a radiant figure awaited me. "Welcome, Marcus," said the figure with a voice that echoed in my mind. It was God, or something presenting itself as a divine entity. Its presence was overwhelming, a mix of comfort and awe. "You have made it this far," continued God, his voice laden with power. "But there are truths you need to know." God began to reveal disturbing truths about existence and divine evolution. He explained that the world we knew was just a small part of a much larger and more complex universe. Human life, with all its pains and joys, was a necessary experience for spiritual growth. Every challenge, every suffering, had a purpose. Desperate and with a heavy heart, I pleaded with God, "Please bring Peter back. He didn't deserve this. Make him come back to life." God looked at me with compassion, but his response was firm. "Things are as they are and cannot be changed, Marcus. Your brother's death is part of the great cycle of life. Now, it is time to return," said God, extending a hand. In the blink of an eye, the light around me began to fade. I felt a gentle pull, as if being drawn back to reality. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the garage, surrounded by the familiar objects of our childhood. But as I looked to the side, reality hit me with full force. There lay Peter's body motionless, still holding the Hades virtual controller.